All right, so in this video, I'm going to go over selecting motors and motor delays. So how are rocket motors named? They're always going to be in the form of a letter, number, dash number, such as E96. So we're going to go over what each part of that means. So the letter, that denotes the size of the motor, not literally how big it is, but the total impulse, how much power does that motor deliver. So a baseline motor, that's an A motor. You can see it's pretty small just compared to a quarter. But it might send your rocket a couple hundred feet. But what happens when you go to a B motor? Well, a B motor, that's 2 times more powerful than an A motor. So every time you go up the letter in the alphabet, the motor doubles in size, or the total power. And you can see it's not 2 times bigger, it's just slightly bigger. But a C motor, right, a C motor would be 2 times more powerful than a B motor. But now you might be thinking, well, that's exponential growth. What happens when you get to an O motor, a P motor? Well, that's when stuff gets really cool. So on the left, you can see that's a small model rocket, maybe like a C motor. And on the right is a Q motor, probably a 20-foot tall rocket. So let's just see how different they are, just to help you visualize the differences in the motors.
Hold it down.
Hopefully the video is not too laggy. You can see just on a couple hundred feet, it got small, but it arched over, didn't go that high at all, and it's pretty quiet. But now let's see how this Q motor rocket flies. You just that sound, and it's still going. I mean, it's going thousands of feet. Remember, that's 20 feet tall. That's a really powerful motor. Well, now I have a little caveat. Before you get too excited, no, you cannot just go buy a Q motor. There are laws that are preventing you. You have to get certified, but that just shows you how much potential there is. You can work up and launch some really, really big motors. Maybe not a Q motor, but definitely a K or an L motor. And that's still a lot of fun. So now back to naming rocket motors. We know what the letter means now. So what does the first number mean? The first number, that's the average force. What's the average power the motor's delivering when it's burning? So just a couple of key points. So a low average thrust, that means the rocket burns for a longer time because it's more spread out, and that allows the rocket to go higher, but it's not going to go as fast because it doesn't have the same kick. But at the same time, a high average thrust, it's going to burn for less time. It's going to let your rocket go really fast, but not as high because, again, the motor's not burning for the same length of time. And now finally, that last letter, that's the motor delay in seconds. So the motor delay, that's the time between when the motor burns out and stops powering your rocket and the parachute deploys. And this is really important to get right because of something called the deployment velocity. That's how fast your rocket's going when the parachute deploys. If your rocket's going too fast, well, the parachute can get stuck because the motor, it has a small explosion on the inside of your rocket that's going to push the parachute out. If your rocket's going too fast, well, the nose cone might not come off, and the parachute's going to stay inside, and that's not good. So ideally, your deployment velocity should be as close to 0 as possible. That means your rocket just stopped climbing, and it just as it stops climbing, the parachute comes out. But that's not always going to work, and you'll see why. But that's why you're aiming to keep it less than 30 miles per hour. That's pretty much a requirement, or else you're risking the parachute getting stuck and not coming out properly. So what motors can you use for your first rocket? As I alluded to earlier, you have to use an A to E motor. You can't just start with a Q motor. That's the Mr. Mills policy. So some suggestions I have are E96s and D12.5s. Those are motors we're going to have at school. Other motors, we can't guarantee we'll have them, but these are motors we have plenty of. And if you want to launch a rocket on campus, it has to be a smaller rocket. It can't go as high, so a B64 would be perfect for that. So now this may all seem overwhelming, and you might be wondering how to choose a motor. Well, the answer is OpenRocket could do a lot of the work for you. So I'm going to pop over to OpenRocket and show you how to do that. Okay, so now I'm in OpenRocket. I have just a basic rocket set up. As you can see, there are no motors. Right here in the flight configuration, it says no motors, so it's not flying at all. So the way you're going to add motors in OpenRocket is go over to the Motors and Configuration tab. So on the left, you can see motor mouse. That's which part of the rocket is holding the motor. That's going to be your inner tube. So you're going to click inner tube, and now that allows you to start setting up your motors. So you want to click New Configuration, go to Select Motor, and now these are all types of motors. Again, most of these we don't even have at school. So to hope you select a good motor that we probably will have at school, go to Clear All and then just select Estes. If you just select Estes, first of all, that limits you from A to E motors. So these are all motors you'll be allowed to use on your first rocket. And a lot of these we have at school. So here's the E9s I was talking about. They're not all E9.6s, and we have D12s. So let's say I want to simulate this rocket with an E9. I don't know the motor delay yet. So here are different options I can use. So let's try an 8-second delay. So we're going to test out an E9-8. So as you can see now, OpenRocket simulates the motor. So the way you're going to run a simulation is go over to Flight Simulations, click on the configuration, and click Run Simulations. Now it gives you a bunch of numbers. Some of these are important, like the apogee, that's how high your rocket goes. But the two I'm going to focus on in this video are the velocity of deployment and optimum delay. So like I said, OpenRocket can do some of the work for you, and optimum delay, that is your motor delay you need. To get the velocity at deployment of 0, you want to have an optimum delay of 6.5 seconds. Well, now an E9 6.5 doesn't exist, but an E9.6 does exist. So let's see, if I go over to E9, if I go over to the motors and configuration, change that to an E9.6 right here under the motor delay. E9.6, now let's go simulate it. Our previous velocity deployment was 40 miles per hour. That's too fast. So let's run a simulation now and see it went down to just under 12 miles per hour, which is good. And now you can go and add new motors. Let's go to new configuration. Let's select another motor. Let's try a D12. And again, we don't know what delay. Let's try D12-3. Probably going to be too small. Now you can run more simulations. You can click both, run simulations. As you can see, optimum delay 6 seconds. I would go back and change that. Now you can just add as many motors as you want, test out, see how fast you can get your rocket to go, how high you can get your rocket to go, choose some good motors, make sure your motor delays are right, and keep in mind some of the basics I covered in the video, and have fun designing.